Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Pleasure to welcome back to the program Mehdi Hasan. He's the founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief of the new. Well, it's not that. I mean, it feels like you're everywhere now with Zeteo. I feel like half the things I watch in the course of a day are stuff that you guys have put out or read. So excited that you got Prem Thakur over there doing reporting. Welcome back to the program, Mehdi.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
Last time, the first time actually we've met in person was, I guess it was like 5 or 6 weeks ago. There's been a very crazy 5 or 6 weeks since then.
Yes.
But you were premiering a documentary your first documentary that I guess Zeteo has produced called Israel's Reel Extremism. And let's play a clip of that, and I want to talk about this project.
This is a special forces operator, Chen Cohen. His viral videos from Gaza landed him a spot on one of Israel's most popular national bulletins. I'm trying to understand the motivation behind these humiliating videos from everyday Israelis. Guys like this who fit your kitchen.
All right, can we just pause for a second? Yeah, just because, Sam, you want me to talk over these subtitles just so for the podcast audience?
Oh, sure. Yeah, let's do that. Right.
We'll bring it down a little bit, but just so people know, this guy in this particular clip here, I guess, Mehdi, his name is Chen Cohen. He's an Israeli Special Forces operator. So this is what he had to say in the documentary. I wanted to show the Israeli public the kitchens in Gaza as a part of keeping sane in the midst of war. It heartens some Israelis to see that we are winning in Gaza. And others get a sense of penetrating the private spaces of Gazans, or that Israel is humiliating Gaza. No door gets scratched, no fingerprints. The doors cannot break because they don't exist. Get your kitchens in Gaza and leave me alone. In every war, part of the war is that you bring a picture back to the population you are fighting for. And part of this picture depicts humiliation because it's a war and the losing side is humiliated.
Okay, so let's keep it from there. And I mean, it sort of puts to the lie as to, who this war is supposedly against, doesn't it, Mehdi?
Yeah, this is a war which they talk about quite openly. We were able to, Basement Films, which made this film, UK film production company, went out to Israel, got these interviews with Israeli soldiers like Chen Cohen, who says, I'm superior to these people. Do I look superior? Yes, I walk around feeling superior because I am superior to these people. He says he doesn't care about life in Gaza. Another soldier says his commander told him to do it. The brother of another soldier says, yeah, torturing terrorists is fine. A prominent Israeli TV host tells the reporter that, I have no problem humiliating the Palestinians. This is the language of dehumanization. It's the language of genocide, in my view. And it is a reminder, yes, Sam, that this is not about, it's not even about, forget getting back the hostages or even just avenging October the 7th. It is simply this idea that Gaza is ours. There's an interview in the documentary with a young settler who says, I'm going to go back and build houses in Gaza. And if we have to kill 1 million Palestinians to get rid of Hamas, fine. So that is the attitude, and people don't want to really bring themselves to admit it. One of the reasons we funded this film is because we want Americans to see what our tax dollars are paying for. Too many of our members of Congress, too many of our media class just say shared values. They're our ally. We must support their right to self-defense, and they don't want to look. They're looking away from what is actually happening on the ground. These Israeli soldiers who are posting these genocidal videos on TikTok. And when you ask them, as we do in this documentary, Israel's Reel Extremism, why they did it, they have no qualms saying why they did it.
I mean, even that particular person there, later in that interview, he said, quote, there should be no life left in that place, I believe, which means he's
pretty genocidal, right, Emma?
Yeah, right. It seems a little bit genocidal, I would say. But the thing that's I think, incredibly horrifying and frustrating for us, as we've been commenting on this since October 7th, and then, of course, covering Israel's apartheid regime and dehumanization of the Palestinians prior to that, is the fact that these intentions were made quite clear by the people in the highest levels of government in Israel immediately after October 7th. And the conditions that led for this to happen, even in the way that the Israeli government is structured, nothing has changed. You know, the realities of the reality of Netanyahu, for example, his majority coalition, including the far-right extreme parties and Likud, of course, his own party in the Israeli government, and the so-called moderating forces being in the minority, that has not changed. It was the same on October 6th, and it's the same today. And so I just wonder how much information has to pile up for people in the Biden administration and this lame duck administration to take Israel at its word.
I think let's be clear, but they know what's going on. If you watch, and Sam mentioned Prem, who we just hired as our political correspondent at Zeteo, if you watch some of the questions he asks to Matt Miller and Vedant Patel, the spokespersons at the State Department, which often go viral because they just avoid answering very simple questions. What have you said to the Israelis? Have you asked about this kid they killed? What are you doing about the torture camp? They know. And I'm not naive enough to think they don't know. But what I would like is for the clips from this film and other great journalism that's been done in Gaza and in Israel to constantly be shown to these people, to at least not just shame them, but to put them on the spot. Too often, when you see interviews with American members of Congress or American administration officials about our support for Israel, it's all very abstract. Do we support Israel's right to exist? Do we support, Iron Dome? Do we support all of this nonsense? We don't say, hey, do you support this soldier going into this house and blowing it up or stealing the kids' toys? Are you okay with that? And in fact, since we made this film, things have only gotten worse. We could make 3 new films in the time since this film finished filming and editing. We've had the torture camp that's been revealed. We've had one of the soldiers in the film, a guy called Barefoot Rom, who you see at the start of the documentary. He's still posting clips from Gaza. So the fact that he appeared in this film, he didn't think, well, maybe I should stop doing this now.
The one thing that struck me about the way this, what this film sort of presents is that there is the reporting out of Gaza has diminished, obviously, progressively as Israel has targeted more and more journalists who are working in Gaza. But there are no outside outlets that are allowed to go in and, except for those that are like literally walked around by the Israelis. And the fascinating thing about this that is so undeniable, because there's so much, at least in my experience, particularly in my personal life, any expression of what the reality there is on the ground is immediately, because of the nature in which people have been conditioned, in my opinion, is immediately considered suspect. And the thing that's so powerful about this is more or less unmediated from the perspective of Israelis who are in Gaza, as opposed to any other, entity. And it is, it's devastating in that regard.
I mean, Sam, I'm glad you noticed that, because that was a deliberate decision that we made with Basement Films when we watched the film, when we watched their proposal, and we watched what they got, which was there are no Palestinian voices in this film. And that's a deliberate decision to show the war inside of Israel. Of course, Israel, we talk about Israel as the Jewish state, but 1/5 of the population is Palestinian. But it's through the prism of prominent, connected Israeli Jewish voices. We have a prominent media personality who talks about, I have no problem humiliating the Palestinians. We have a prominent far-right politician, Ayelet Sheked, who basically defends the torture of Palestinian detainees. We have a young settler. We have an aid blocker, a woman with her baby, Sam, who walks across, trudges in the heat across the desert to make sure that no aid goes to the people of Gaza because they're all Hamas. And of course, we have multiple soldiers. And that was a deliberate reason, as you say. Take it from them. Don't take it from me, the brown dude sitting in America. Don't take it from Palestinians in Gaza. Don't take it from those evil human rights groups or the biased UN. Take it from the people who are in Gaza filming this shit on their phones.
And it's only gotten worse since then, as you say, because now there's an open conversation in Israeli society if rape is a legitimate way to deter Palestinian terrorism in prisons.
Shameful.
So, like, to the point that you could make 6 or 7 more films since then with this kind of rhetoric. That is like an explicit just chapter of this horrible genocide. The fact that rape is now being discussed as something legitimate to do to detainees.
I want to talk about pivot this conversation in terms of like American policy, foreign policy towards Israel. And, it was a much sort of like the idea of Joe Biden as the nominee, who is really been, I think has even surprised, I think, a lot of like in the foreign policy establishment as to just how relentless and how unconditioned, I mean, just completely unconditioned, his support and willingness to give weapons to Israel is. I mean, blowing through the Leahy laws, blowing through personal humiliation and national humiliation. I mean, like, I don't recall another time where there has been so many things that have been completely blown past. I mean, just even Patel, the speaker, the defense comms
State
guy,
Department guy,
State Department, he's cited in that Haaretz piece about all the abuses that are going on of Palestinians. He's actually cited, like mentioned in that piece, and he still sort of throws it off like it's just like irrelevant reports. I mean, there's so much sort of gaslighting going on in terms of there. But and I want to talk about the implications of like Harris and what we can expect from Harris and what we've seen so far. But before we do, let's contextualize this in terms of like, let's play this clip of Miriam Adelson. This is at a fundraising event, and I guess it's a Stop Anti-Semitism event.
It was a campaign event, right?
I mean,
Well,
whatever.
for Trump, there's a whole subplot here about why is Trump going to Montana and then doing fundraisers in New Jersey when he's falling behind in the race, but it's because he's leaning into like, give me more money. I'm now the pro-Israel guy, AIPAC and Zionist lobby. And so he had Miriam Adelson, who's the widow of the pro-Israel mega, donor, and now she is one herself, Sheldon Adelson, introducing him at this event.
And I just want to put with this one context. It was reported in June, I think it was, that Miriam Adelson was looking for was teasing Donald Trump with $100 million in a PAC. And what her ask was, annex the West Bank. And this is like round 2 in terms of this dynamic. She did this in 2016. Here's Miriam Adelson speaking.
Lest he delivers us from their hands. In other words, the Jews are the people of the promise. We believe in the power of public commitment, of closing a deal with handshake and mazal und brocha. Did I say it correct? And friends, there is one president in our lifetime, just one, who fully shares that values. And act on it. That president is Donald Trump. He promised to recognize Jerusalem and to move the embassy to Jerusalem. Promise kept. He promised to withdraw from Iran nuclear deal, and promise kept. He promised to bring peace between Israel and Arab nations. Promise kept.
I don't know about that.
And all in Golan Heights, that was a big gift. He promised Golan Heights, and he recognized. And all of this he did in his first term while battling COVID pandemic, race riots, and the liberal media.
Okay, I think we got the shopping list. Mehdi, just give me your reaction to this. I mean, because we kept deliberately in that clip that Donald Trump understands the importance that you make a deal with a handshake. I wonder whose hand he shook to deliver those things.
Donald Trump, famously, man who keeps his promises and sticks to his handshakes. Look, one thing about that clip, look, what she said is correct, to be fair to her. He did do those things. And, you know, there's never been better proof of the fact that there's no connection between being pro-Israel and being pro-Jewish than in the form of Donald J. Trump. Because he was super pro-Israel. Miriam Adelson is right. But he's also one of the most anti-Semitic people we've seen run for office anywhere in America in our lifetimes, including at this Stop Anti-Semitism event. It was an anti-Semitism event at which Trump did lots of anti-Semitism in terms of talking about Jewish lobby and the power of Jews, which they're fine with, as long as he's saying it in the context of backing Israel. And look, let's just take this beyond Israel, because when I talk about lobbies, I like to talk about all lobbies. The oil and gas lobby. We know that Trump had a meeting in Mar-a-Lago where he said, give me $1 billion, you know, Dr. Evil style, and I will do whatever you want in terms of opening up drilling for you and all the rest. He literally just sells the United States government and the Oval Office to the highest bidders, and Miriam Adelson is one of those bidders, alongside oil and gas executives, alongside the gun lobby, alongside all the rest of them.
Well, I mean, what you said. We have that clip
clip
here, yeah. He repeatedly refers to the pro-Israel lobby and then says Jewish people over and over throughout this speech, but this was just one of those instances.
If you're playing the clip, just imagine a Democrat. Imagine Ilhan Omar saying this.
Imagine that.
Imagine the reaction.
That's number 7. Okay. Yeah.
Loco, something's wrong with them. Never seen this. I never thought this could happen. Do you know, just to get off for a second, years ago, my father was a big supporter of Jewish people and Israel. He's not Jewish. He wasn't Jewish, but he was a great friend of a lot of Jewish people. I want
to make that clear.
And if you said, let's say 15 years ago, maybe not even that long, anything bad about Israel or Jewish people, you were finished as a politician, right? You were finished. You wouldn't do that, Congressman. You wouldn't do it anyway, but nobody would do it. The most powerful lobby in this country, by far, was Israel and Jewish people. Today, it's almost like, what happened? What happened? What happened to Schumer? What happened to all these people? Schumer's like a Palestinian, right? It's a Palestinian. You got to remember that, though. It's, you know, it's shocking, because I grew up where Israel was, was supported. My father was a builder in Brooklyn, and a lot of Jewish people. That's all he knew. That's all I knew, essentially. But we knew Jewish people, and they were great people.
Can I just say there, you have to hand it to Donald Trump. He's one of the few people I know who can engage in anti-Jewish and anti-Arab bigotry in consecutive sentences. Just manages to be racist towards the Palestinians, calling Chuck Schumer a Palestinian as a pejorative, preceded by the Jews, the most powerful lobby in America. And I knew a lot of Jews because I was in the construction business. It's amazing what he gets away with. Amazing.
I mean, it really is stunning. You had you know, Ilhan Omar and frankly, Thomas Friedman both made the case about AIPAC, specifically about AIPAC, which is not representative of Jews in any fashion whatsoever. Not as a function of data, not as a function of theology, not as a function of religion, not as a function in any way whatsoever. Or in what they actually propose. I mean, we can just look at this in terms of polling, in terms of where their exercise has gone. But Trump conflates this, and to a certain extent, we have Israeli leadership that also conflates this, which is, I think, you know, frankly, from my perspective, not making Jews safer. It's actually making Jews take responsibility for something that has nothing to do with Judaism.
So, someone like Jonathan Greenblatt at the ADL, who spent the last 10 months policing campus discourse, whatever every student carries on a placard, often goes after non-white members of Congress, to Cori Bush's, Rashida Tlaib's, Ilhan Omar's, viciously goes after JVP, compared Jewish student groups. I think he called them not mirror image. He used some phrase comparing them to the KKK and white supremacists. The reverse image, I think he said. This is a guy who, where is the ADL and the AJC and all these groups? Why are they not out this morning, outraged about what Donald Trump said yesterday? Where are they all?
Right. He's a guy. Do you remember that guy Donahue? I don't know if you involved from the Catholic League.
Yes, yes, I remember him.
And he was a guy. The Catholic League, incidentally, was an operation of him and his longtime secretary in an office, and he would just go and do television hits as a way of defending. Claiming that people were anti-Catholic bigots when all of the priest stories were breaking, I guess close to 20 years ago now. And there's a quality of the ADL has basically functioned in that way. I mean, they're just, it really has become quite a racket. And then you do see it in moments like this. But let's turn to Harris and, as a way of pivoting into what's going on with the election. But from your perspective, what does Harris need to do? There's polling out from YouGov that shows in swing states, if Harris came out in favor of conditioning weapons, or maybe I think it's phrased as embargoing Israel in terms of weapons, and demanded a ceasefire. And those two things are sort of inexorably linked if you're going to be honest about it. You can't. They're demanding a ceasefire, but it means nothing. It's not a demand if you don't exercise your leverage.
Exactly.
What is she? What can she do in this instance, and what can she not do?
Yes. So let me say three things. One is the polling is hugely important that came out from the IMEU and YouGov. Actually, Prem and Zeteo covered that story first. And in a shameless plug, just to go back to what we talked about earlier, realisrael.film. Got to get the plug in, Sam and Emma. REEL Israel.film if you want to watch the documentary we were talking about earlier. Number two, in terms of, I'm so glad you linked ceasefire to arms embargo, because Matt Iglesias and a few other bad faith actors are going, oh, these protesters just wanted a ceasefire. Now that Biden and Harris are calling for a ceasefire, they're moving their goalposts and saying they want an arms embargo. As you point out, there is no ceasefire without an arms embargo, because Netanyahu just keeps the killing machine going until we stop giving him the killing tools. So that's very inextricably linked. And last point I would say is the polling is so clear for the Harris campaign. Forget morality. Forget international law, forget the Palestinians. You don't need to care about any of that stuff. All you have to care about as a Democratic strategist is, do you want to win the election in November? And this poll from YouGov is so strong in three of the key swing states. It shows that 1/3 of Democratic voters who voted Biden in 2020 and plan to vote again say they are more likely to vote for Harris if she were to support an arms embargo. Only, I think, around 8% say they are less likely to vote for Harris if she were to come out for an arms embargo. And even more fascinatingly, when you look at the number of people who are 2020 Biden voters who say they now will not vote for the Democrats, will stay at home or vote third party, 57% of those people in these swing states say they would vote for Harris more likely if she were to come out for an arms embargo, and 0% say they are less likely to vote against Harris if she were to come out. It's like a no-brainer, this policy. You look at the paper, it says, I can do something that's super popular, will cost me very little, if nothing, and is the right thing to do, and sets me apart from my opponent. Now, the question is, why won't she do it?
And distances you from the administration in one of their clear, their least popular thing. And I think go ahead.
I was going to say, we've seen this film before. 1968, Hubert Humphrey was running a campaign against Nixon. And I'm actually writing about this right now, which is in 1968, he waits till end of September to give a speech saying, end the bombing, distance himself from LBJ's campaign. LBJ's not happy about it at all. Ironically, LBJ is the last time a president decides not to run for re-election for a second term. And look, he loses very narrowly to Richard Nixon. And I would like to see Harris distance herself from this hugely unpopular policy, this kind of thing hanging around her neck and Biden's neck much quicker. She's hit the right rhetorical notes. She has projected some empathy. She is going to meet with the uncommitted folks. She is dealing with hecklers now much better than she was and Biden was in some extent. But talk is cheap, right? What are you going to do about it? And that is the fundamental problem that the Harris campaign has not yet addressed head on. And if you look at the polling out today, I believe, or last night from Michigan, there's a new poll that has Trump neck and neck with Harris when there's a third party candidate and marginally ahead when there isn't, or vice versa. Either way, Michigan still is not looking good for her.
Right. I mean,
she's
lagging. It's that close.
Yeah, lagging behind Wisconsin and Pennsylvania in that growth, I think, as well. Go ahead, Sam.
Well, I would add, I mean, it's not the at least the precedent of a vice president or a member of administration breaking, or a candidate breaking from the president. You have Clinton with the TPP. I will say that, frankly, Al Gore, picked Joe Lieberman because he wanted to distance himself from the supposed immorality. I mean, those were much more innocent times, I guess, of Bill Clinton. But can she do any? Well, two things. One, do you see a difference between an embargo and conditioning certain weapons on, withholding some weapons? I mean, embargo technically means zero weapons.
No, it's a very good point, and language matters. And I do think actually, the more I do think about this, and I'm glad you raised this issue, because conditioning aid comes across much better. It's much easier to sell. It's actually something that was part of the Democratic Party conversation in 2020. If you remember, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders both came out for conditioning aid for the first time in 2020. Even Pete Buttigieg, who by then had moved into the centrist lane, came out for conditioning aid to Israel, because there's a certain rationality to it, right? We're gonna sell you weapons and we're gonna put conditions on it, which you would assume is done by any government in the world when they sell weapons.
We have them too. I mean, they're already in place, right?
The regulations. Well, Leahy laws is like the end point. We just have basic regulations to begin with when you sell anything to anyone. And then, yes, you have the Leahy laws. And by the way, Patrick Leahy, retired senator from Vermont, was asked recently, is this in violation of the law you passed? And he said, yeah. So like the guy whose name is on the law is saying we're violating the law. Multiple State Department officials who have quit the administration, like Josh Paul and others, have said we're in violation of the law. So it's very easy for Harris to come up with a case that doesn't make her sound pro-Palestinian or anti-Israel, and just say, I'm applying the law. We're going to apply the law. We're going to look at the law. We're going to apply the law. We're going to condition aid. We're going to make sure that Israel has a right to defend itself from evil Iran and evil Hezbollah. But we're not going to give them 2,000-pound bombs or even 500-pound bombs to drop on schools and refugee camps. I think that's a winning message. I don't think there is a big cohort of Americans who say, no, I'm not going to vote for you unless you give Itamar Ben-Gvir a 500-pound bomb to drop on a father who just lost his two twins.
We are in total agreement about how it's the politically smart thing to do, and it's probably the right thing to do for her in terms of trying to maximize her chances to win the election.
Which means I
am curious. Yeah, I am curious though. I'm just trying to put myself in. If I was Kamala Harris, vice president to a president who is, in my view, seemingly very much sundowning and having difficulty understanding the stakes, and how regularly he's being humiliated by the Netanyahu administration. He doesn't seem to really kind of register when red lines are crossed or when they're not. And I know part of the administration wants this to happen, but she's the vice president under a ultra-Zionist, rabid anti-Palestinian racist whose brain has ossified to the point where it's not changing. How much can she signal politically without showing Netanyahu that there will be a shift in policy and causing him during this lame duck period to escalate with some place like Iran, or to pull the United States into a quagmire that he knows would cause her issues if she were to come into office? I could be overstating that case, but those are the kinds of things that I think get a little bit left out when we're putting this in the context of electoral politics.
The problem is, and I've had this conversation with a few people, including behind the scenes with people who are involved in this stuff and the decision making. I think there's a danger of playing too much 4D chess or 3D chess, whatever the bloody phrase is, with Netanyahu, because at the end of the day, Netanyahu will do what Netanyahu wants to do. And a lot of what Israel does is driven by domestic politics and by his coalition partners as well. And I just think, look, the reality is you could cut it both ways, Emmett. You could argue that if she escalates now, that makes Netanyahu escalate and puts Democrats in a bad position, right, going into election. For example, a full-blown Middle East war does not help the Democrats. Let's just be very clear about that going into a November election. On the other hand, if she doesn't escalate, he's escalating anyways. I mean, they just killed Hania in Tehran, which is an escalation, and the Iranians have so far resisted responding in kind. Let's see how long that lasts. So either way, they could get screwed. The bottom line is nothing they've done so far has worked. That's the starting point of any conversation. Whatever strategy, the bear hug, the this, the that, the temporary conditioning of aid, the calling of a ceasefire, nothing has worked.
Giving the speech and claiming that Netanyahu, I mean, there's a good TikTok on this, on apparently Biden's aide had him sort of pull back from what they were going to do and trade it for the strategy of claiming that, of going public with what Netanyahu's original sort of like ceasefire deal was, because I guess they thought that he couldn't change his mind again. And of course, he's been doing that time and time again. It's quite clear at this point.
My position from the beginning, and I wrote about this in The Guardian several months ago, is if Ronald Reagan could ring Menachem Begin and get him to stop the bombing of Beirut in 20 minutes, Joe Biden can get Netanyahu to stop it in at least 20 hours or 20 days. It's been.
And the stunning thing is, it seems like even like the Israeli military, to the extent that we've seen reporting in Israel, even the Israeli military is looking for Biden to do that.
Yeah, they want an off-ramp because they know that the strategy is not working. They know that Hamas cannot be defeated. The ridiculous George Bush-style mission accomplished banner ain't coming. You saw a bunch of Israeli security officials, Sam, including Ehud Barak, former prime minister, write an open letter to the Biden administration and to Chuck Schumer saying, don't host Netanyahu. Please don't host him in Congress. So this idea that it was just lefty protesters outside, it was Israel's security establishment saying, please don't host Netanyahu. So the strategy has been a miserable failure. Whatever Biden's remembered for, he'll be remembered as the great enabler of Israel's worst prime minister. And Harris, so to go back to Emma's question, I don't think you need to overthink it. I think anything she does at this point that is not what Biden has done is an improvement. Right? Because whatever the course we're on now is we are barreling towards a disaster, possibly a full-blown regional war. And yes, Netanyahu and co are running down the clock. They're waiting for a Trump victory. They want a Trump victory. The only person who likes Benjamin Netanyahu in America that I can see right now, like, are the House GOP caucus who love Netanyahu. There is a constituency in America, in American public, in American media, whatever it is, for the president of the United States, and if not the president, then the vice president, presidential candidate, to come out loudly against Netanyahu and talk about how she will not give him the weapons to kill innocent civilians.
I would be very happy with that, and it will be interesting what tactic she takes, because the protests are escalating and they're going to be quite loud, and as they should be, at the Democratic National Convention this week. So this is not going to be an issue that she can avoid, even if she tries to. And there is a part of me that's sympathetic about a bit of the bind that she's in, being still officially a part of the administration. We kind of parsed some of what Phil Gordon tweeted out the other day about how essentially will always allow for Israel to defend itself against Iran. I'm paraphrasing a bit. But that language felt quite specific. And, she tried to signal some coldness in her meeting with Netanyahu. And these are kinds of things like Trita Parsi picks up on these little nuances. He was writing about this. But from an electoral politics standpoint, to your point, these efforts to have the public read between the lines for her to say, like, I'm not a rabid Palestinian racist in the same way Biden is probably insufficient for these voters, and it should be.
It is insufficient, and fundamentally, just look at American politics over the last few decades. Ronald Reagan stopped Begin. George Bush Sr. went against Shamir. They both took a lot of incoming for doing that, but they did it. Two Republican presidents, to be fair, did it. Democratic presidents since George Bush Sr. have been repeatedly humiliated by one man, Benjamin Netanyahu. Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and now Joe Biden, all been humiliated by one man, Netanyahu. Bill Clinton famously came out of a meeting with Netanyahu and said, who the fuck is the superpower here? So this has been going on for decades. It's a no-brainer that Kamala Harris breaks with that and stands up to Netanyahu.
just take a step back on the race at all. I mean, it's been sort of crazy how I mean, there's been such a massive swing since Biden dropped out. I mean, I think it, we were advocating for Biden to drop out and for Harris to come in, but I don't think, like, if you had asked us 4 weeks ago, would it be this much of a turnaround? I don't think that we would have said, of course. I mean, I think, it was clear they were going to have problems with Harris in terms of attacking her, because, Harris basically is like the cake in a refrigerator, and they want to take a bite of the cake, which is the DEI candidate, but they can't. And so every time they open the fridge, they see the cake there, they shut it quick because they just cannot seem to attack that ticket. What's your sense of what's happened?
First of all, Sam, you're being far too modest, dare I say self-flagellating. I think the three of us should use 4 words constantly, which is "we told you so." I don't think we should be immodest about that. I wrote a piece for The Guardian at the beginning of July saying, step aside. Actually, the night of the debate, I did a video on TikTok, Instagram, literally that night, 11 p.m. saying, he's got to go. I've been defending him for months. I was defending him at MSNBC. I was saying age was an issue. That night, I said he's got to go. I then wrote a piece for The Guardian saying not only has he got to go, but it's got to be Kamala Harris who just takes over. Forget all the mini primary, open convention. Right. Just give it to Harris and move on.
We were all aligned on that. Yep.
And people attacked the crap out of me. The blue anon folks, or whatever you want to call them, blue MAGA, who are the most shameless people I've come across in a long time, and I cover Trump for a living. These are people who, till the bitter end, Biden's not going anywhere, and anyone who says Biden should step aside, they're Trump supporters. That's what you are, Mehdi. And then the next day it was, we love Kamala Harris. She's amazing. We've always loved Kamala Harris. It's very 1984-esque who we're fighting the wars with. Sorry, I'm going to keep calling those people out because the shamelessness and the grift is amazing, especially the online partisans. Look, we were right. We said this would happen. Yes, I don't think any of us thought it would happen to this extent. But yeah, I did think that there would be massive enthusiasm for a black woman, for a history-making candidate, for the first woman president, for the first black woman president. I did think there would be a moment to break with Gaza, which she has rhetorically at least managed to do so far, but not in policy terms, as we've discussed. And I did think the Republicans would struggle to attack her because they're lazy and racist and bigoted. They don't really have much. Trump is not the guy he was in 2016. Plus, they don't seem to even planned for it. I think they assumed it would be Biden till the end.
It's amazing. That part is amazing to me.
They had no plan B. They spend millions of dollars on all these consultants who are all grifters on the GOP side, and no one had an attack memo or something ready to go. Trump is running around testing out Kamambla and other such ridiculous nicknames that aren't sticking. They're obsessed with Tim Walz, who is a super popular guy. By the way, can I just say another "I told you so"? I said, pick Tim Walz. He'd be the guy. No. You can't win Pennsylvania without Shapiro. Kamala Harris is doing very well in Pennsylvania with Tim Walz as her running mate. And they're losing their minds. They have no attack lines against Harris, against Walz, against the Democrats. I just find I'm amused. I'm enjoying it. Look, I'm under no illusion. The support for Harris is soft. It could go away next month. I think the convention will be important. I think defining herself will be important. I think getting the policy lines out are important. I think resolving the Gaza issue in some shape or form will be important. The election is too close to call. Don't get me wrong. As people clip this up later, I'm going to be very clear. Either side could win this election. This is a 50-50 election. But clearly Democrats now have a fighting chance in a way they did not have when they had the old dude still as their candidate.
Right. I mean, it's now, I think, genuinely a 50-50 election, whereas I feel like a month and a half ago, it was sort of like a 48-45 election and not in favor of the Democrats in that instance. So
and you get to say "I told you so," Mehdi, in the sense that because this is maybe the first time I feel like us on the left are seeing, when we say this is good strategy for the Democrats to go in this direction, and them actually adopting those strategies and seeing them pay off quite quickly in the results, in the way that polling has shifted. Yes. Like this is not Bernie Sanders politics. I'm under no illusions about this, but Kamala Harris
Bernie got this one wrong, to be honest.
Yeah, well, and I was critical of that strategy. He could have been using that time when it was clear Biden was going to drop out to actually leverage some of those policy positions he was thrusting onto Biden, like a 5% increase, capping rent at 5%, which is not in her platform. He could have been using that instead of having Biden come out and do that. But we can relitigate that at another point. I think he's biased because they're personal friends, to be honest. But Harris, like, she's adopting just a standard Democratic Party platform, and Walz coming into the ticket as somebody who, you know, he was a pretty standard Democrat throughout his time in Congress, but has this incredible, you know, he has an anti-Iraq war history. And when he governed in Minnesota, he just decided, I'm going to actually use my political capital here and do things for the people in the time span that I can do it. And reportedly, that was what she liked about him. And that's what gives me excitement about this candidacy, is that the Democrats, maybe for the first time in my entire lifetime, have decided that we're not going to do the triangulation game and hold on to power for power's sake and cut deals with Mitch McConnell and then give ourselves big pats on the back, a big effing deal like Biden said about the Affordable Care Act. We're going to govern, and we're going to try to deliver, because, you know, none of this has paid off for us. When we play footsie with corporations, they price gouge for their own profits and then blame our administration.
Well, I'm glad you've highlighted that part of her record, because I do think the single biggest thing she's done and not got enough credit for from the left is picking Tim Walz. That was a huge move. Maybe people don't understand the kind of inside Beltway politics that goes into that. That was a huge move. I did not expect that. Let me just be clear in terms of prediction games. I thought she'll never do it. She'll go with Shapiro. She rejected the candidate who the big donors wanted, who was the guy calling for corporate tax cuts and, you know, vouchers for schools, and obviously the position on Israel and BDS and campus protests, which we didn't like. To go against that and say, actually, I'm going to ignore all the consultant class, all the cable news pundits, all the big money donors, and I'm going to go with Walz, that was a big move. And that made me think, oh, she is serious about governing, as you put it.
And I will also say this, just as a closing thing, to get your take on this. The campaign they have been campaigning in a very different way than we've seen Democrats do before. Like, you know, and you know, part of it is just, there's a different set of tools than campaigns have had in the past, but they're the ones who keep promoting all the crazy stuff that Vance has said, right? I mean, like, you know, a lot of this is baked into the cake. People don't, you know, like you say, if Ilhan Omar had said what Trump said over the past couple of days, you know, he would have been run out of the country as an anti-Semite. But Vance, because he's sort of like, you know, new blood in some way, things stick to him more. And it's also a function of, like, you know, a bad mistake that Trump made. But they're putting out all these audio clips of Vance saying just those bad crap, crazy stuff, and not waiting for the media. Like, there's always been this problem with Democrats where it's like, we just need the media to tell the truth.
No, you need to lead. You need to lead.
But yeah, that's not the way the media works.
No, it's very, especially on Vance. I mean, they got lucky with having Vance as an opponent rather than a Nikki Haley or whatever it is. I mean, he is one of the most unlikable people I've ever come across. I can only think of one other politician who is uncomfortable in their own skin as JD Vance, and that is Ron DeSantis. And I just think it's very easy to attack the man. I mean, he just makes it so easy. You know, he's got let me use this phrase, rhetorically punchable face. I'm not advocating violence, but in terms of making fun of him, it's very easy. And they're doing it. And not just that, they're going after Trump. They're going after Trump's mental health, which I think is exactly the right thing to do. You look at the polling, the moment that Joe Biden stepped aside, suddenly Trump became the old guy in the race. Trump became the mentally incoherent guy in the game. Trump became the guy who's unfit for office because he's not all there. And I think the Harris campaign have rightly lent into that. People keep saying, well, it's the same campaign, it's the same people. Maybe, but they're certainly doing something differently in terms of their press releases, in terms of the rallies they're holding, in terms of the attack lines. And I would say more of that, please, more of that.
I just wanted to also note, you know, as we were talking about Miriam Adelson wanting to, you know, Trump to annex the West Bank. Next week on Tuesday, I think it is, we're having Jasper Nathaniel on, talk about a piece that you guys are publishing of his that about reporting that he had been doing in the West Bank. People might know him as Infinite Jazz on Instagram. And he's been in and out of the West Bank over the past really 6-7 months. and has done some great reporting out there. And I'm looking forward to talking to him about that piece. And good for you guys for publishing it. It's really
it is a very powerful piece, and it tells you a story about the West Bank that we don't hear often enough.
Indeed. Mehdi Hasan, we're going to put a link to Zeteo, obviously, but also to the new documentary that you guys have put out.
ReelIsrael.film, REEL, ReelIsrael.film. Please do check it out. It's a film that more people need to see.
And thanks again for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Emma.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.